Francis was not a perfect person. He was not a perfect pope, but gosh, did we need him. And he was an important pope. We have someone in the Francis mold in Leo, I hope. Francis made an example of the first cardinal in history of the church to be tried before a Vatican tribunal. He was convicted of embezzlement and fraud. It was quite a scandal, but I was inspired by that scandal. And many before it. You know, I have spent a lot of time at the Vatican. I love the Vatican. A lot of people don't realize that until the late 19th century, there's no such thing as a place called Italy, okay? It was a collection of duchies and principalities and republics, and then it created a country. But the largest and most important were the papal states. Big hunk of central Italy was controlled by the church and the pope. That's where the church made a lot of money. So when Italy was created, the church lost the papal states, and with it, all of that income.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci, and this is my favorite time of the year. Happy 4th of July to everybody, but it's also my favorite author. I do have to confess this, so other authors out there, please don't be mad at me. But Daniel Silva, who I have read for probably 15 years, one of the greatest American spy novelists ever, and he's a returning guest and a great friend of mine and a friend of this show. And the title of the book is An Inside Job, and it is a great title apropos to what's going on in this book, Daniel. So you are my favorite. It's the best way to start the summer is to read about my favorite protagonist, Gabriel Allon, and you can say whatever you want, Mr. Silva. I know you are Gabriel Allon. I know that's how you think, how you live. But tell me what we're doing this summer. Why do you think readers, because he's older now, he's lost a step, he's got a little bit of a pouchy midsection, which unfortunately I can relate to and empathize with. Why is he still connecting with readers so deeply?
Well, first of all, the guy doesn't have one ounce of fat on his body. He's a slender, slim, incredibly fit.
Okay, let me rephrase. You describe him as a little slower. You describe him as a little slower when he's in a situation, a little older.
Well, let me go back to the beginning. We'll go to the origin story. You know, when I created him, he was never supposed to be a continuing character. Okay, he was supposed to appear in one book and one book only, and he was completely age appropriate for that novel. And he was someone who had done a number of very high profile, important operations for Israeli intelligence, lost his family to a car bombing in Vienna, and left the service and was out and was just living basically as a recluse and working privately as an art restorer. And that's the character I created. Pretty good character. And my publisher at the time talked me into writing another one. And I have to say I was opposed to it. I did not think it was a good idea. I did not think that someone who was Israeli or even Jewish was going to work as a truly mass market character. I was concerned that there was too much anti-Israeli sentiment in the world and frankly too much anti-Semitism. And I actually resisted. And my publisher at the time said, "You're wrong, write another one." And I had a book ready to go, and it involved the conduct of the Swiss banks during the Second World War. And actually, Gabriel was a perfect fit for it. I plugged him in there. That book did better. And then I wrote my third book, which was a Vatican thriller. It seems crazy to think it now, but when I first conceived the novel, Gabriel was not supposed to be in it. I turned it into a Gabriel Allon book. And at that point, I realized that I had a series. And until recently, I let the series progress basically in sync with the real calendar. Okay, maybe it's slightly off. And so, yeah, he is older now.
I love him.
And I've changed the stories as a result. You know, I don't want to pretend that he's still 40 or 45 years old and doing these things. Although he's still a dangerous guy, and you wouldn't want to mess with him. But also it's just frankly, the way he is now was the way I always wanted him to be. And I was pressed and pressured and advised and counseled to make him a very violent, tough guy. The whole tough guy thing was really working at that time. And a part of me regrets that, because this is who he really is.
Yeah, so let's describe him.
He is multilingual. His grandfather was one of the great German expressionist paintings. His mother was a very prominent painter. So he, as I write of him in this book, he's born with a paintbrush in his hand. He was born in Israel, but his first language is German. So he speaks German, Hebrew, Italian, French, and he speaks perfect English. So he's an incredibly brilliant guy. He, as I point out in this novel as well, he never finished has no formal education, because his education was interrupted by war and terror. But he's a very erudite, amazing individual with a unique skill set. And I have tailored the stories now to fit a character like that. He's more Robert Langdon and a little less, Jason Bourne and Jack Reacher.
Yeah, but listen, first of all, I learn something every summer. I've learned about the Vatican, my church. I'm obviously, as you and I both talked about, I'm a practicing Catholic. I've learned about your prediction skills. I do know you're a little bit of a mystic. You're able to see into the future and portend some of the things that are going to happen to us, whether they're acts of terrorism or strategic alliances that are happening in the world, wars that are about to take place. Let's go to the novel. It kicks off in Venice.
Yep.
We're with Gabriel. He's restoring an altarpiece. Why that city? The Titian altarpiece, I should say. Why that city? Why that painting? What drew you to the story there?
Well, Gabriel has... Venice is where we sort of met Gabriel. That's where he was living early on in the series. It's where he trained as an art restorer. It's where he served his apprenticeship. He is, by popular acclaim, by universal acclaim, he is the greatest restorer of Italian Renaissance paintings in the world. So he lives in Venice. He and his wife run the most prominent restoration firm in Venice. They are taking care of all those Catholic churches there and all the art inside them, and they are doing big restoration projects of all the churches and buildings and art in Venice. So they're a very prominent couple in Venice. So we meet him in this novel. He's working on one of the Titians in the Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute. That's that gorgeous basilica that you see it stands right near the mouth of the Grand Canal on the Dosaduro side of the canal. One of the stunning landmarks of Venice. And during his mid-morning coffee break one day, he goes out to the end of the point there, and he's looking across the water towards Monchiori, and he thinks he sees something out there. And he asks a water taxi driver to take him out there, and what he discovers is a badly decomposed body of a young woman. And we're off to the races. And the Italian police ask for his help in the investigation. Not to be too graphic here, but the corpse is badly decomposed, and they need to produce a forensic sketch. And we see a new skill set that Gabriel has, his ability to produce a forensic sketch, which is something that's just always fascinated me, trying to either turn a skull or badly decomposed human remains into something that we can use to help identify a decedent. And we see that he's able to do this, and one thing leads to another. And he's on the trail of a long lost painting by Leonardo da Vinci.
All right, it's summer, and let's be honest, there's nothing worse than tossing and turning in a hot room, sweating through the sheets like you're on a bad cable news hit. I've had those nights, and they can be miserable, which is why Cozy Earth's bamboo viscose sheets are a game changer. These sheets are temperature regulating, incredibly breathable, and they help you sleep several degrees cooler. I'm telling you, the first night I slept like a baby. No heat, no humidity, just cool comfort. Cozy Earth even gives you a 100-night sleep trial. So try it during the hottest stretch of the year. If you're not in love, send it back. But trust me, you won't. Upgrade your summer. Go to CozyEarth.com and use code OPENBOOK for 40% off best-selling temperature-regulating sheets, apparel, and more. Trust me, you'll feel the difference the very first night. Sleep cooler, lounge lighter, stay cozy. You think there's one out there? Do you think that there is a long-lost Leonardo somewhere that we have?
You know, this is something that I went into before I even started working on the novel with my contacts and my people inside the art world. And the short answer is, I would say there probably are a handful of paintings that, you know, we do not have complete documentation of that very, very busy studio of his. We don't know every single painting that was made and where every painting went. And so I researched it with my people and people who have worked on Leonardo's before and who are Leonardo experts. There's a difference of opinion out there, but I say that there's a distinct possibility that there are a handful of Leonardo oils still to be found. So what is a Leonardo, though? Okay, that's the next question you have to ask yourself. Is a painting that's a product of his studio that other assistants worked on, and maybe he put some finishing touches on that? Is that a Leonardo? I say it is. There's a painting that he might have supervised. I say it is. And so what I did is I turned one of my favorite Leonardo sketches. One of my very favorite Leonardo sketches is regarded as one of the greatest sketches ever made by art historians. It's a sketch that called Head of a Young Woman is what we call it now, but it was a preparatory sketch that he made. It's one of the most beautiful sketches ever made. And he used this unknown, probably Milanese young girl as the prototype, as the model for the archangel Gabriel in a painting called Virgin of the Rocks. I always thought, my goodness, he should have painted her the way he drew that sketch. Look how few strokes of his silver point pen he used to make that. Look at the penetration of character. Look at that, the perfection of that image. I just one of my favorite paintings of all time.
So, the Salvator Mundi, which just a reminder.
Here we go. We're going to get into some trouble.
Yeah,
here.
let's have this conversation because it is tied in, because this makes the book so fascinating, because you're on the trail of the past, but what makes the book so fascinating, you're on the trail of the past to apex geniuses. Da Vinci, to me, is an apex genius. Isaac Newton is an apex genius. And there are some people in the Western world over the 5,000 years of our recorded history that would literally realm in any time. They would be the leaders of their time. And so that's what makes it so fascinating. You're on this trail. So let's talk about the Salvator Mundi for a second. For those people listening in that may not know it, the Salvator Mundi was discovered in Louisiana. It was brought to a few restorers, and some of them drew the conclusion that it was a Da Vinci, and some, I guess, it was a woman.
I think it was brought to one. It was
The woman, right? There was a woman
with
restorer.
Diane Modestini, a very prominent restorer, and so they found the painting, and I think they paid $1,100 for it from this auction house in New Orleans, and it, not to go too deep in the weeds, but we know how to restore paintings now. For centuries, though, they were subjected to barbarous restorations, or what I would call them repaintings. This thing was covered with layer upon layer upon layer of overpaint, as we call it. And Diane stripped it, as we say. She took all that stuff off, all the dirty varnish and all of the overpaint, and she says, "Oh my goodness."
You moved the thumb, right? What made her think that it wasn't?
Well, there were two thumbs on the blessing hand, as we call it, and there were, which suggests that if you look at, if you were to be able to look on one of my favorite paintings, the Deposition of Christ by Caravaggio at the Vatican. I don't know if you've been to the Vatican museums. Under Jesus's the hand that we see, I think there are about 4 or 5 other hands down there where Caravaggio keeps moving it around. And so pentimenti like that is suggestive of an original work, not a copy. If you're just copying something, you're not going to be making changes like that. And so that thumb is, is suggestive of.
I have hedge fund managers that were thinking about bidding on it, and they were worried that it wasn't real. They didn't say that it wasn't real. They just were worried that it wasn't. Sure. It wasn't conclusive to them. Was it conclusive to you? Is the Salvator Mundi real?
I'm going to leave that to people who know a lot more about it than I do. Okay. I have. I've come to the conclusion that it is at a bare minimum a studio work that came out of Leonardo's studio. I know someone who was involved in that whole process, who was looking at that thing under microscopes and everything else, and it is convinced that he can see the brushwork of Leonardo in there. I'm not going to. I'll leave that to people who. I'm not an.
I find it fascinating because he's. I find it fascinating.
There were some issues with it, though. There were some issues with it.
What makes your book so great, and I think it's important for me to tell people why you are my favorite spy novelist, and what makes your book so great is you're not just a spy novelist. You're an art historian. You're a travelogue. You're a Baedekers, frankly. I feel like I know restaurants that you've been to. I know places in Cornwall. I know places in Venice. I know restaurants in Washington, some of which you've blown up, that I have frequented. But I want to go to the Vatican for a second.
Sure.
So, because I'm trying to talk to you in a way, Daniel, where I'm not trying to give away too much of the plot. I want to talk about our guy. He's super tough. He's very charismatic. He's good looking. He's got a young wife. He's had tragedy in his life. He's a Renaissance man.
Definitely.
He knows his wine. He knows his art. But he also knows how to beat the daylights out of somebody and be an assassin if necessary. But you pick things for a reason. So story set in Venice. You've explained that. We've talked about what we're looking for, which is fascinating because that's part of our world right now. We found one, and obviously the Crown Prince owns it. But why the Vatican? Why put the Vatican in this story? And by the way, once again, Mr. Silva, the Vatican becomes a huge, important part of 2025.
Yes,
because we got a new pope. So you picked the Vatican. Before that happens, boom, here we are. Why the Vatican?
Well, as the fans of the series know, I mean, there are subsets to the Gabriel books. There's a Russian subset of novels. There are art subset there, but one of the most important subsets of the novels are the Vatican thrillers. And as I said a moment ago, Gabriel first encountered the Vatican in a book called The Confessor. It's one of the best entries in the series. And he formed an incredible friendship with a man named 𝗕liche𝘵𝗵𝗻𝗔. At that time, he was the private secretary to the fictitious Pope Paul VII. And now 𝗕liche𝘵𝗵𝗻𝗔 is the Pope. And so there are a number of the books have been set at the Vatican, and Gabriel has worked as an art restorer for the Vatican. And that's why he's on a first-name basis with everyone at the museum in this novel. He has restored numerous paintings for the Vatican, including the aforementioned Deposition of Christ by Caravaggio. He's as we say at the Vatican, he's a man of trust. He walks through St. Anne Gate into the palace without through the bronze doors without anyone checking. And for me, it's a guilty pleasure because I'm fascinated by the Vatican. I love writing books about the Vatican. I think this one might be my favorite one yet in terms of because there is he is trying to track down this missing and stolen Leonardo, but it's also a story about sort of what was going on inside the Vatican during the papacy of the previous pope, and just the war inside the Vatican between Pope Francis, the reformer who wanted to clean up the financial mess, and the old guard who didn't want him doing that sort of thing.
You know, the Vatican.
Yeah.
And I love my church.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Obviously, you know, there's an expression in Italian, which I'll translate.
So do I, by the way. So do I.
Once a Catholic, always a Catholic. Now, has my church has its problems? Have there been scandals? There's been, obviously, the sex issues, which has hurt the church and in many ways weakened the church. But there's also been some corruption inside the Vatican. And so the corruption that you're detailing, and again, I don't want to go into it, I don't want to ruin the plot, but the corruption that you're detailing in the Vatican, how much of it is rooted in actual events?
In my story,
in the inside.
It is, as I say in the author's note. It's not quite a roman 𝗕cie, but it was inspired by the scandal involving Cardinal 𝗕cie, who was he was the sostituto, so he's the third most powerful prelate in the Roman Catholic Church for a time, and he got involved in a massive financial scandal involving this terrible investment in a commercial office building in London. And Francis made an example of him, and he's the first cardinal in history of the church to be tried before a Vatican tribunal. He's convicted of embezzlement and fraud, and it was quite a scandal. And so I used that, sort of drew from that and mixed it in with my art caper. But I was inspired by that scandal, and many before it must be said. I mean, that was just the most recent one, and I think that much of the Vatican's woes when it comes to the financial scandals in the Vatican Bank all go back to Pope Paul's decision to hire and ask his friend Michele Sindona to be the Vatican's financial advisor. That's not the guy you wanted to be. You know who he is, and
yeah, of course. I mean,
his record here in the United States, and that's where it all stems from.
Those that are anti-Catholic and those that are it hurt the church. Let's go to there's a fascinating detail in this book.
Okay.
And this is about Mussolini's 1929 payment to the church.
Yeah, sure.
Why was that piece of history important to you and important to the story?
Well, we have to go back further, okay? So, unlike you and I, a lot of people don't realize that until the late 19th century, there's no such thing as a place called Italy. Okay, it was a collection of the duchies and principalities and republics, and then we created a country. But one of the largest and most important little independent statelets in the Italian peninsula were the Papal States. Big hunk of central Italy was controlled by the church and the Pope, and that land and those estates produced a lot of income for the church. Okay, that's just like someone who owns a big chunk of land in England. Okay, the rents and the everything. That's where the church made a lot of money. So when Italy was created through war and conquest, the church lost the Papal States, and with it all of that income, and from the 19th, from the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century, the Vatican did not have a lot of money. So when Mussolini, we had the Lateran Treaty, that is the sort of the origin of the Vatican's modern wealth, was when they got a big cash payout, and they brought in a financial advisor, and the Vatican became, in effect, an international holding company. It bought huge stakes, invested huge stakes, mainly in the Italian economy, had controlling stakes in many of Italy's largest companies, and then as the decades went by, began investing abroad. And so we learned in the last couple of years, exactly how much real estate, for example, the Vatican controls, and it's a great deal of real estate in Europe.
So I see the Vatican as the church, but it also feels like a global corporation. I mean, in the book,
it's multiple things. It is a sovereign country.
Yep.
With the Pope is a absolute monarch. We have the Secretary of State is something like the foreign minister and prime minister of the church. So it has embassies around the world. So it has a government. Like any other little mini, it's a very small state, but it has a government and embassies around the world, and so yes, it's a religion, but it also acts in world events as a nation state.
So again, we have the church.
Yep.
We have arguably one of the most famous artists, and when we think of the word Renaissance man, I mean, you got to think of Da Vinci, Michelangelo, others, but Da Vinci is really the guy. And we have this brilliant former Mossad agent, and you've got murder, corruption, history. It's all blended in here. Love the book. I'm going to tie it up with the 5 words, and you may remember this from other times you've done this with me. My producer and I picked out 5 words, and we'd like you to give us the Rorschach test, a few words about it, a sentence. I'm going to say the word Vatican. What comes to mind? You say what?
I have spent a lot of time at the Vatican. I love the Vatican. I was able to spend several days in close proximity to Pope Benedict when I was working on a book. I love the place. I really revere the place, and I have been all through it, and inside the restoration labs and at the museums. So I am utterly fascinated by the place, by the faith, by the history of the church, the good and the bad. And I just love every second that I spend at the Vatican.
Okay. Power. Think about power.
Power.
Say the word power. You say what?
I'm just like I'm liking that word less and less and less, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I
hear the word corruption. Unfortunately, when I hear the word power,
that's what I
think
think.
of I think of Lord Acton, sir. I think power, corruption.
And I don't know if you we didn't get a chance to discuss the Pope in this novel, Pope 𝗕𝗏𝗏, and I don't know if you got a chance to read the sermon that he delivers in Palermo.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the, set aside everything else, that's the most important moment of the book, and why I'm so pleased. Why I personally was, Francis was not a perfect person. He was not a perfect pope, but gosh, did we need him? And he was an important pope. And we have someone in the Francis mold in Leo, I hope. And when I hear the word power right now, I guess that mind first thoughts goes to the powerless. That's where I am right now.
It's interesting, and I'm going to bring this up. You could react to. I think we have an American Pope because the Vatican. And by the way, he's a great guy, and I had the opportunity to meet him when we were restoring St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Lucky
Ken
you.
Langone had him in town and with Cardinal Dolan, and we spent a lot of money. Us New York Catholics spent a lot of money restoring the cathedral, but. He's a great guy, and he's now Leo, the 14th, but we were calling him Father Bob back then.
Father Bob.
And he's a great guy. But I think we have him because the Vatican's hurting. And the Vatican knows that the Catholic dough is in the U.S. We have a poor clergy. If you look at the 2 billion Catholics and you look at where they are around the world, it's an indigent population.
Sure.
And the Vatican has a little bit of a shortfall going, could be from the sexual scandal payments, other things. And I think Father Bob,
remember the Vatican.
he's going to be a prolific fundraiser for them. Sorry, what were we going to say, Dan?
The Vatican very skillfully siloed itself off from that scandal. It drew a firewall and kept it. The payouts were made at the diocesan level, and that's why we bankrupted so many American dioceses around the world. So yeah, there were huge payouts, but the Vatican took steps to protect sort of the core holdings of the church, in my opinion.
Yeah, listen, the church is going to, long after we're gone, you and me, my friend, the church is going to be here. The church, the people.
I hope so.
Well, I believe so. Well, anyway, I'm a Catholic, so I believe that. Let's go to the word art. I say the word art, you say what?
Gosh, I'm just one of those people that just gets weak in the knees in front of art. If you could see behind me all of the art books, I'm very lucky that my life revolves around my own writing, great books, great art, and great music. It's just so important. I'm at a loss for words how much art means to me and how important art is. And it should be more than just a fungible asset. It should be more than just an asset class. I know a lot of people put tons of money into art, and they do it for investment reasons. I wish it were all in public display and not locked in the Geneva Freeport.
It's so interesting. When I hear the word art, I think of eternal. I think this is the expression from human beings, the chip of creativity that's going to outlast all of us.
Well, we see Gabriel. He's standing atop this platform restoring the Titian, and he's actually talking to Titian. And because he's right in there with Titian's original brushstrokes. Imagine that, putting it on your,
There you go. And there'll be somebody after Gabriel in 2145, 2235. It'll be doing something similar. There's a conversation being threaded over the millennial through our art. What about the word Daniel Silva? When I say the words Daniel Silva,
Gosh. You know, as I can start to see the end of my career, and you know, I'm thinking more and more what I'm going to leave behind. You know, yes, I write spy novels, but I mean, this is not a spy novel by any means. It's a mystery. It's actually sort of a novel, to be honest with you, more than anything else. I guess what I hope people will remember about me is in my books is that they aren't about pure power and about you know, bad guys shooting up the place. That I hope that people will understand what my kindness and my humanity as a writer. Okay, yes, I do write popular fiction. Yes, I do write commercial fiction. But there's a message in all my books, and they're much more than that. And I hope that when I'm paws up, as I like to say, that's what I'll be remembered for. My humanity.
I'm gonna channel your wife. I'm gonna say stud author when I think of Daniel Silva.
Me? Stud author?
Yeah, you know you are. I mean, look at you. Look how elegantly dressed you are. Okay, I'm sitting here in a T-shirt that says "Don't make me repeat myself," and you're sitting there swanking.
I would have gotten dressed for you regardless.
Swank as can be. You're sitting there. You're sitting. The next time I see you, I'm going to be in a suit. It wasn't that amazing wedding. Okay, the last word. I'm going to give you the last word. Gabriel Allon. I say the two words. Gabriel Allon. You say what?
Yes, he's did some violent things in defense of his country and his people. But when you think of him in the end, think of him the way he looks after his children. Think of the way he is with his kids. Think of what he is. Everything about Gabriel, it is about restoration, and not just paintings, about situations, about righting past wrongs, about looking after the weakest and most vulnerable in society. He's a decent, kind person. That's who Gabriel Allon is.
Well, listen, I'm counting the days until the next Gabriel Allon novel. You know,
Me too.
One of the great sad is when I finish it, I'm like, another 355 days. I got to wait for another one. But thank you so much for joining us on Open Book. Of course, the title of this book is An Inside Job. It's by Daniel Silva. And it's always a great pleasure to see you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.